Welcome to Grassroots Iowa. This is Conversations at the Crossroads of Faith and Politics. This is a show where we explore how timeless biblical values and conservative principles shape the decisions that affect our families, our state, and no doubt the lives that we live here in this beautiful state of Iowa. Now, I'm your host, Pastor Jeremy Higgins, and we're here at our studio at Calvary Community Church in Cedar Rapids, and we are honored to have Cindy Golding with us today, state representative, I believe it's House District 83, Roland County.
Yes, House District 83.
Super blessed that you're here with us today. Just a brief background for Cindy. Lifelong Christian, you're an entrepreneur, a farmer, a small business owner. You're the mother of 6 and the grandmother of 21. That's amazing. Your husband, Joe, is also an amazing man and really involved in the local scene here. Big fan of your family and everything that you're doing. Cindy's an advocate for agriculture, for family values, parental rights and education, of course, our Second Amendment rights and freedoms, and protecting that rural way of life. You serve as a vice chair for the Natural Resource Committee and on the Transportation, Local Government, and Justice Systems Appropriations. We're about to dive deep into this intersection of faith, policy, and how we can steward Iowa according to God's principles. Again, Representative Golding, I'm so blessed that you're with us today. Welcome.
Well, Pastor Jeremy, it is a pleasure to be here, and I am so honored to represent my district. But not only that, to be a voice for our values. And one of the things that always surprises me is the ones who I would expect to stand up for our values who don't. So,
Indeed.
So that has been one of those interesting things I learned when I went to Des Moines.
Yeah, how long have you been there in Des Moines as a state representative?
I was elected in November of 22, so I started January 23. And have served for 2 terms. I'm looking to serve again for a 3rd term.
That's right. So you're currently running.
Yes.
Elections are in November, and towards the end, we'll get to where people can get a hold of you and ask you the questions, that they should be asking. Usually right out of the gate, I always ask folks, tell us a little bit about your faith journey. When did you come to the Lord? What does that look like? And how does it affect the way that you minister to your family and how you minister to your constituents?
Well, I grew up in a family that went to church intermittently.
Okay.
It was a little church. My mom used to say we had 1 church and 13 bars in our little town. So
a lot of little towns like that.
Yeah. So we went to church, but I specifically remember when I was 9 years old, we got Pastor Wickstrom came, and they had been missionaries in Africa.
Oh, cool.
And I loved hearing his stories, and we'd have him over for dinner about once a month to our house.
Wow.
And he did a thing in our little tiny church. He had the slideshow. At that time it was, the old slide projectors.
Yep, right.
For the places they had served in Africa. And it intrigued me, and he talked about how dark it was and how we needed to bring Christ's light, and this, you light a candle and the darkness goes. And
Amen.
so as a kid, I was intrigued. I'm also a scientist. I was a science geek as a kid.
Cool.
And of course, you hear what we were learning in school is we learned that there was evolution, and my mom would say,
Sure.
You can be from monkeys. I came from God.
There you go. I love it.
But I found that when I went to college, I needed to dig deeper into what I had learned, because I was in college when the college kids were going nuts over the Vietnam War.
Okay.
And so I joined Campus Crusade.
Oh, nice.
And it was amazing. I lived in a dorm, a Jewish dorm, because it's the only place that had opening when I finally got there.
Sure.
So there were 1,200 students.
Wow.
200 of us were not kosher Jews.
Is that right?
But they let us Campus Crusade meet in the dining room.
Wow.
And it was fun to bring, so we had Jews for Christ in our dorm, and just learning the differences. And throughout my life, when I learned that you can lean on Christ, there have been many times when I had to lean on Christ.
Amen. Yeah.
And you get to a point in your life where you say, this is beyond my ability to do it, Lord. Too often we want to do it all on our own. And
Right.
being a research scientist, I want to prove all these
Sure.
things, But I learned, especially even in the lab, the things that we couldn't explain, the more we knew we didn't know.
Right.
Every time we made a discovery, it dispelled somebody's absolute science.
Sure. Oh, that's
So
fascinating.
so that's my journey has been in constant ongoing revelation of, "Oh my goodness, God, you're so big."
I love it. I have a good friend, Dr. Rick Oliver, who actually used to teach evolutionary biology in the universities of Southern California. And if he found out that one of his students was a Christian, boy, he would give you a very rough semester.
Yeah.
Um, Eventually, when Mount St. Helens erupted, he was actually on a helicopter approaching the mountain when it erupted.
Wow.
And he had a part of his team that was on the mountain waiting for them. And that individual passed away, but the whole thing is recorded, audio and video of the mountain erupting. The helicopter crashed. They survived. His teammate passed away, unfortunately. But um, in that process, he had this radical come to Jesus experience where he actually went to the spot a year later where they had been doing their testing, trying to determine how old these areas of the earth
Yes.
were. And they took tests from this geographic spot that they were a year earlier, but now they were testing millions of years different. And so he started sending those all over to different labs all over the world, and they were coming back completely different. And it sent him on this wild journey, having to deal with science and
Yep.
couple that with faith. People think that science and faith are separate, but
They
they
are not exclusive.
they really are not. They blend together so beautifully.
A true scientist will recognize that we are merely discovering what God has put there. And when you're talking about that carbon dating, so
Yes.
when I was in the lab, we realized that carbon dating was technique dependent.
Hmm.
So whoever was running it could come up with repeatable results,
Sure.
but give that same sample to somebody else and they'd come up with something very different.
Oh, wow.
And so those kinds of things gave me substance to start challenging some of my
I
coworkers.
love that.
And people confuse evolution with survival of the fittest.
Sure.
So different species will change over time because of survival of the fittest. If
Yeah.
they have some characteristic that allows them to survive and the other ones die off, that characteristic will get stronger. That is not evolution.
Right.
That is survival of the fittest and a
Right.
gradual adaptation to your environment.
Yeah.
But a dog doesn't turn into a cat.
Right. Right.
A monkey doesn't turn into a human.
Well, I'm
Those
evidence
kinds
of
of
that. I'm a
things.
desert dweller, moved here 17 years ago from Arizona, and now I'm able to survive the Iowa winters. So
Absolutely.
we've
That
adapted.
takes something.
It does. It does. Let's talk about the Morgan Valley Power Plant.
Oh,
I
boy.
know. Let's just jump right in.
Oh, boy.
Really controversial, and it's not just the power plant. There's some data center, conversation as a part of that as well. What do you know about all of that?
Well, let's go back to the beginning.
Excellent.
So, because when something doesn't make sense and something you start saying, where is this coming from? You have to go back to what started it. So, in 2006, Alliant Energy made some very bad decisions and they sold off the nuclear power plant
Right.
because they needed to get back into some of the reserves they had.
Hmm.
So, we found they sold it to NextEra.
Okay.
But then, so NextEra company is an energy company, and over time, the tax credits that NextEra was getting from the federal government started diminishing for nuclear power generation,
Sure.
and our federal government started dumping more money in tax credits into the supposed green energy of windmills and solar
Right.
panels.
That's a whole
So
nother
then
one.
they
Yeah.
started pulling tax dollars away from the nuclear power plant. Now, that's all our tax money. People confuse that as public money.
Right.
That's your tax dollars, my tax dollars.
Right.
Anyway, they were stimulating wind energy, and Iowa was in fact exporting electricity. We had
at that
excess
time or still?
at that time.
Okay.
We were exporting electricity, and then Alliant didn't want to pay. So you have a distributor of electricity that has to pay for the electricity. They didn't
Sure.
want to pay NextEra what
Right.
NextEra wanted.
Well, okay.
So they sold the power plant. Now they don't want to pay what NextEra, because NextEra is losing tax credits.
Sure.
Power goes up. So what happens? We have a derecho, and that's a good excuse to shut down the power plant and put in all those solar panels all over. And so I was involved in that, trying to bring some common sense to that, which didn't happen. So
Sure.
again, when things don't make sense, you got to follow the money.
There you go.
So our Linn County supervisors at the time, Stacy Walker, Ben Rogers, and Louis Zumbach, had to vote on that. Louis voted no. Ben and Stacy voted yes. We got fields and fields, thousands of acres of solar panels.
Yeah. Solar
So-
farming, that's what they
So
call that.
yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
So again, fast forward, President Trump comes into office and says solar panels, we're going to start cutting some of the tax credits to some of this green, theoretically green energy.
Right.
And data centers are starting to come online.
Hmm.
Data centers need a lot of energy. So from 21 on, long before I was elected, I was involved in this discussion because
Okay.
I live pretty close to, I live, it's in my district,
Okay.
but I live only about a mile and a half straight across the river from the solar field, from
Oh,
the
wow.
Duane Arnold nuclear power plant.
Right.
So again, we start looking at this stuff doesn't make sense. And I started hearing that our grid was fragile because wind and solar are intermittent sources of energy.
Sure.
So I started talking to NextEra about can we turn back on the power plant. I was actually in Washington, D.C. as an elected official talking to them about, we have to bring this power plant back on to stabilize our grid.
Sure.
Now, at that time, I didn't know about all the data centers.
Sure.
So we start this conversation. Alliant still doesn't want to be the customer for NextEra to sell the energy to. So NextEra goes out and starts courting who wants to buy the energy that the nuclear power plant is going to
Okay.
generate. And so they teamed up with Google. Now, think Cedar Rapids. That's the one over in Palo.
Right.
Cedar Rapids gets a lot of, we have an economic development program. And so Cedar Rapids was going to get a lot of not only kudos for bringing in, brownie points for
Right.
bringing in data centers, but also the economic development dollars. The problem is once it's located inside the city then controls the approval for all the zoning, all the permitting for water, all the energy, how it's going to get there. They are in control of all that. So they approved these 2 data centers, but there's not enough energy to support the 2 data
right.
centers, which is the driving force for this gas-fired power plant. So that's why I wanted to go back. It's
Sure.
not-
No, that makes
it's
sense.
because of Alliant making a poor decision back in 2006 to sell off the nuclear power plant.
Right.
So then you and think of all the tax dollars. Now, fast forward, Ben Rogers, supervisor who approved the solar panels, now works for Alliant. And he is their public
Oh,
relations
boy.
person who is supposed to be telling us why we need a gas-fired generator.
Wow.
So the problem with the gas-fired generator are twofold. Number one, the only reason we need it is because of the data centers.
Sure.
Let's put this in perspective. Right now, there's either existing or under construction 102 data centers across the state of Iowa.
Oh, wow. Just in the state of Iowa. I thought you were going to say in the
many
country.
Oh no, it's like 5,500 or something,
Sure.
4,300. I forget what the
I'm
big
definitely
number
out
is.
of the loop on
Yeah.
the conversation.
Most of the data centers, they are trying to annex into little tiny towns
Sure.
because once they're inside the city limits, then the county, several of our counties have passed moratoriums or at least a pause on data centers. Well, if they annex inside a little tiny town, then the town is responsible and does not have to answer to the county moratoriums.
Wow.
So they're looking to annex into towns much smaller than Palo. Palo only has, I think as of the last census, 1,009 people.
Oh, wow. That is small.
No, they're trying to go into towns of 200, 176,
Wow.
350, all across the state of Iowa, because that way they sidestep, they bypass all of the regulations on water and wastewater,
Hmm. And
and
these need a significant amount of water to run, right? To
it
cool their
depends.
systems down.
So, I wrote a bill when I started hearing about all of this and lots of questions. And one of the things I do is I work with legislators across the country. So we have to kind of know what's going on in our surrounding states
Sure.
to know what's happening. How can we work together? What are the things we need to be aware of? So I'm on Zoom calls uh, at least twice a week with legislators from at 15 to 20 different states.
Wow.
And I have been hearing about some of the problems with data centers down south. And in some areas where the data center has come in, they have sucked the water dry, and towns' wells have dried up.
Oh, wow.
Now, the way it works, a data center, say Google or somebody, they rent the space. So if they pull out, they cancel their lease, whatever, you're
You're just
left with
stuck
this
with.
big empty building
Hmm.
that has destroyed your farm ground. They have sucked up all the water. They have created an environment. And so I'm hearing about some of these towns
Wow.
um, in other areas.
And
So
that
I
can be
start,
catastrophic for small town America.
it can be. So I wrote a bill. And for anybody, I have a copy of it for
Oh,
you
I
for
love
you
it.
to do
Thank you.
research. But the bill, for anybody who likes to look up this stuff, is House File 2690. And it was a transparency bill. So I hear all these stories. And if you're out on the internet, you'll say, oh, well, this is, like Kevin O'Leary is saying, this is CCP false information, making it's unfounded fears and all
Sure.
this. And I don't know. So my bill, House File 2690, is just transparency. Tell us how much electricity you plan to use and how that will affect the ratepayers.
Oh, that's excellent.
Tell us how much water you plan to use and how it will affect our structure right now. Do we need new wells? Will it impact our available water? And what do you plan to do with the effluent? Will it overwhelm our sewage treatment plant? Will it
Sure.
have heavy metals in it? Do you plan to filter it before you discharge it?
Interesting.
And what do you plan to do with the excess heat? Because these data centers generate a lot of heat. Do you plan to recirculate the heat and use that energy?
Hmm.
Or do you plan to just heat up the atmosphere around you? It can create up to 9-degree change in the ambient temperature in an area of about, maybe a quarter mile circumference.
Wow.
So, because of intense heat. So, what do you plan to do? There was no restriction on construction.
Hmm.
No restriction on location, no restriction on energy use, no restriction on water use. Just tell us. Transparency.
Yeah.
My bill passed the Commerce Committee unanimously
Oh, good.
and then got stopped. So the way it works in Des Moines, then the bill needs to come, once it passes committee, it needs to come to the floor of the House to get voted on by the House.
Sure.
And then it would go over to the Senate. So I was going back finding out, all right, where's my bill? Where's my bill?
Right.
And if you've been at the Capitol, you come in, you come in through the rotunda, you
Mhm.
can walk into the House chamber.
Yeah.
But then back behind the House chamber is where all leadership is.
Okay.
So I go back to get a cup of coffee, find out about my bill, and here's all the Google, NextEra, Alliant, and QTS lobbyists all sitting
Oh.
in a row waiting to talk to people.
Okay.
So I don't know why. I have no specifics on why my bill was held up, but I do know that Google has fought all over the country that it will not disclose its water consumption. Now, I don't know about QTS. I was at an event last week, and QTS says, we don't use water. We have a closed loop system.
Okay.
Closed loop systems still use
And so
water.
it uses water, and then
Yeah.
oftentimes that water needs to be replenished. I
Right.
mean,
And that water is highly contaminated once it needs to be replenished.
oh,
Think of flushing your car radiator.
sure.
When you flush it, it's not clean water like you put in when you started. And it may have some treatment in there because it needs to be treated as it's circulating, and
Mm.
it may have glycol in it. I don't know what's in the closed loop system.
Sure.
That's proprietary information.
Oh, goodness.
So when you don't know what's going on, then you say, follow the money when it doesn't make sense. And the other thing I know is one of my kids is a computer guru,
Oh, nice.
and he's been telling me that there is data compression already available that would put these data centers obsolete in a short time. And then there's something else called quantum computing. I don't know anything about that,
Sure.
but the data compression already. And it reminds me when I was in college, my first computer course, big room full of equipment, and we used cards
Right.
stuck in
Yeah,
the
I remember
cards.
those.
Then you went to the small, then I remember the little TI 994A that the
Oh,
kids
yeah,
had
yeah,
that
yeah.
they could make it talk.
Right.
And then fast forward, and now we have more computing data on our phone than we had in that room full of
Isn't
computers
that
when I was in
wild?
college.
Yeah.
That's the kind of transition we're talking about, and it's going to be rather quick.
Hmm.
So then what happens to these massive
Right.
data centers? The other thing I learned this week
Hmm.
was that they build these big buildings and they house rows and rows and rows and rows of computer servers.
Sure.
If you imagine on your home computer and you plug in a terabyte backup thing.
Sure.
So this is backup. When they say your information's in the cloud, it's actually in somebody's server
Sure.
down the road somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So if they don't have enough customers that want to rent these computers, so think of your bank, they might be leasing computers from Google. They
Right.
might be leasing computers from QTS. Think back in the 90s when we have a glut of office buildings because people were given tax credits
Right.
to build office buildings.
Yeah.
And they had, they could write off the loss against their taxes and all that. And we had a glut of empty
Right.
office buildings. The projection is we will have a glut of empty data centers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But these are a lot more massive.
Sure. And it's not just the frame of the building. You have everything inside the building that then has to be dealt with. And, hoping that, gosh, the data center after it left didn't deplete the area of all of its water and,
Right.
The resources that the community needed before it got there and will still need once these centers are gone.
But
That's a scary thought.
There's one more thing I discovered in
Okay.
this whole process. So we get the nuclear power plant on. That's 600 megawatts of electricity that our grid could actually use for stability.
Yeah, that's significant.
So we don't need Google. I mean,
Mm.
having the nuclear power plant is really a good thing.
Yeah.
Now this gas-fired power plant, that's 750 megawatts. If the data centers shut down, we have 750 watts of capacity
Mm-hmm.
that the ratepayers now have to pay for.
Right. Right.
And you don't just shut those things down. Now you have a cost. It's like building the office building.
Right.
If you built the building and you don't rent it out, you still have a mortgage, you still have taxes,
Right.
you still have utilities, or, you still have cost of an empty building.
So all
Or-
of that ends up needing to be shared with
Yes,
all of the
with the
customers.
ratepayers.
And yeah.
So those are the things I've learned from around the country. That hasn't happened here in Iowa yet.
Hmm.
My goal is to stop it from
Amen.
happening in Iowa.
Yeah.
And just so your listeners know, tonight in Atkins at 6:30 over at the American Legion Post 217, it's 89 Main Avenue in Atkins, there's a meeting for people to find out the details about the gas-fired generator and the arrangement with Alliant and all of that. And then tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning, 10 a.m., the Lynn County supervisors will be voting on whether or not to change the zoning to allow that gas-fired generator to be sited
Hmm.
where it is. Now, there's other places in Lynn County, if you really have to have that energy, that might be good. However, anybody who's up against this, we have to think about the three people that need to make this decision. We have 3 county supervisors. The decision on siting is on their shoulders.
Hmm.
And as I have learned, anytime you go against the big guys, you're taking a risk.
Sure.
It's a risk I don't mind taking.
Right.
But we have to think about them. We have to pray for them.
Yeah.
We
Amen.
have to say, Lord, lead them in the right way, because this is for the future of our area,
Right.
either
Our kids, our
destructive or
grandkids.
beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah. And the lasting effects, it's not like they're just going to get turned around. Oh, they move the data center, everything gets replenished. No, I get it. It's a scary thought. There's a family that we're well acquainted with, the Lee family, who
Yeah.
they'll live if this thing gets built, not the data center, but the power plant. From their backyard, their children will be able to walk right out over to
It's
it.
right there.
And there's a lot of families in these areas that are going to be affected by this if it does get built, that a lot of them are just unaware. Far too many people just aren't paying attention, or don't have the right kind of resources to find out the information that they need to know about. And I think sometimes we're so overwhelmed by everything else going on in our lives that you go, oh well, I guess that's we need a power plant, but you're not looking at the bigger picture. Um, there's a group called Save Morgan Valley.
Right.
That if you guys are listening and you're interested in hearing more about this, I would encourage you reach out to Representative Golding. Also reach out to Save Morgan Valley. You can find their Facebook account and website. Just Google Save Morgan Valley and you'll find that. And start to educate yourself on what it is that we're facing here, because we do need to deal with this one way or another. And like I said, I love that, the way you left it. We really need to be in prayer for those people that are going to have to make this decision. And hopefully they're hearing from their constituents, and people are going to listen to the Lord as well before they do that. We'll move on. As a gosh, you and your husband, you have an amazing family, 6 kids, 21 grandkids. You've certainly emphasized family values and, parental involvement in education throughout your career. What do you think the biggest threats are to parental rights right now? And what legislation have you supported or maybe plan to champion to strengthen our resolve as a state to protect parental rights in education?
Well, one of the things, as you are aware, we did the school choice bill.
Love it, yes.
And the school choice allows families to have a choice if they want to go to private school or public school. So, just a little history, back when the state was talking about open enrollment, I was an active parent, had 5 kids. The little one wasn't in school yet, but we were hearing, oh, this is going to destroy our public
Right.
schools. Not only did it not destroy our public schools, it strengthened them. And I'm going
Yeah,
to brag on
made
my
them
school
better.
district. I heard from the superintendent in the early 90s, different superintendent, this is going to kill Alburnett. Absolutely kill Alburnett School. Well, Alburnett School now has 40% open enrolled,
Yeah,
where students from other public schools are choosing to go to another public school
right,
that is doing the right thing.
right.
So open enrollment encourages families to go where it's best for their child. Then we have school choice. We also said that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Yes.
must be removed from your hiring practices, from your teaching practices, from we also have a law that says grooming.
Right.
Challenging a child whether they are the right sex, and you're confused today, maybe you want to be a girl instead of a boy.
Right.
That is against the law.
Praise God.
But the thing that our listeners need to know is that laws are only as effective as they are enforced.
Right.
And if you have any knowledge of any of that going on in your school, you need to let someone know.
Right.
The other laws that we passed were about pornography. I was shocked as a freshman legislator that one of the first bills we were going to look at was pornography in elementary schools.
It's shocking what is in some of those libraries. Yeah.
I was stunned
Yeah.
because none of that was available when my children were in school. And I
Right.
was my youngest graduated in 2010, and I was very active in the schools up to that point.
Awesome.
So this has come into our public schools since 2010.
Mm. And it's really
So,
not that long of a period of time, but
no.
it has been a rapid succession of events that have taken place. And I think, we have seen a rising up of state legislatures standing against these, provocative books and, just the woke ideologies that have crept into the school system. And I know you've been a huge part of that. And so I want to thank you for, you know, uh, really your involvement because as a parent, I have 3 sons and my oldest son is married and Lord willing, I'll be a grandpa in November. They've been married a year and now they're due in November. So, um, I look at the state that we're living in and, I moved here 17 years ago and I've seen a major transition in those 17 years. And you start to worry about, well, what does the next 17 years look like? But to the strong point of that, we've seen an amazing group of legislatures coming together to say no more, no longer. We're going to correct this course, and you guys have been doing a great job with that. So, again, I do want to thank you, and I loved hearing that how involved you were with your kids in their education process. And I think if more parents were involved in a lot of the day to day activities within the public school system, you'd probably see a lot less of this kind of thing going on as well.
Well, that's one of the problems right now because I was active as as a mentor in schools, as just there. So I knew who my kids' friends were. So I
Right.
knew what was going on in schools. So I knew what to caution them about. But we found that some of the schools were not even allowing parents to volunteer.
Yeah.
That now, this is important. We want local control. That means that people need to get involved with their school board
Right.
elections. The pathetic problem we have in Iowa is that we have 6 or 7% of our people who even vote in school board
Right.
elections. And if you believe in local control, you must be involved in school board elections, city council elections, um, supervisor
Right.
elections. Volunteer for things. That's how I knew what was going on. We have lots of boards and commissions. The schools are constantly saying, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. Step up and volunteer. And if they don't let you, find out why.
Right.
Challenge them.
Hmm.
We have, I just need to brag on people that have helped with my campaign.
Excellent.
They are now going to school board meetings on a regular basis. Mount Vernon, Linn-Mar, Lisbon. They're going to the school board meetings. They're asking questions,
Hmm.
and it helps the school boards. We have people that are now going to city council meetings. So when you talk about parental rights, parents have to exercise those rights and not just
Right.
abdicate them, not just let the school tell you what's happening, but pay attention to what your kid's doing. Look at the books.
Right.
You know, pay attention to what are they reading. Ask them questions because even the best book, the most conservative, unassuming message can be twisted
Yep.
by an adult saying, "Well, did you think about it this way?"
Right.
And what
Hmm.
I challenge parents is to think back, what do you remember from when you were in 4th grade or 5th
Right.
grade or 6th grade? What did you hear or read that changed your perspective
Hmm.
to a different direction than what your parents might have thought?
That's significant. I actually have very clear memories of at least fifth and sixth grade. I remember a lot of my friends and things from earlier on than that, but my teachers, especially moving forward, fifth grade, sixth grade, and on into junior high and high school, they had big impacts in my life. Some of them for the positive and a few for the negative. And, I had involved parents. And so they were able to come alongside of me in a lot of those areas. But even with their steadfast involvement, they didn't, catch it all.
Yeah.
And I think that, the issue is multifold, but really you can look at it in two parts. First, making sure that we're aware of what's going on in the school system. Like you said, go to school board meetings. I mean, voting in a school board election cycle is absolutely paramount. We talk to our church about that all the time, but not enough people are doing it. Um, you know, just starting off by going and getting an idea of how it works and listening and signing up to speak. Speak your mind. You have the right to do that.
That's right.
You have kids in the school or grandkids in the school, or even you live in that community. Your property taxes are going toward you have the right to be there. And I think more people need to take advantage of those rights, and especially those with children in these school systems, talking to their kids, a daily debrief. It doesn't take that long to do that. A lot of families don't even have dinner together anymore. The encouragement would be, set a standard in your home. Try to go back to, at least 3 nights a week, but, shoot for 5 or even 7 would be amazing. And have that conversation at dinner. How did school go today? And press when they say, it was fine, because they're not going to want to get into it. But as you develop conversations with your children, they do start to open up more and they learn to trust you. And, having that is absolutely necessary. So being involved within the school system, paramount. Being involved with your kids' education when they're not at school,
Hmm.
also as important. And I think that a lot of families have lost track of that. So you mentioned school choice. It's the ESA program, education savings accounts. A lot of folks aren't even aware that these exist. We have a school here, shameless plug, Calvary Christian Academy. Kindergarten through the 8th grade. We're looking at also launching a high school program. We're working on plans for a gymnasium right now. We really do believe that it's important for families to be involved in their education process for their children. For some families, that's homeschooling, and I love the homeschool model. I will throw it out there, and I'm not ashamed to say this. Homeschooling is not for every family.
No.
I know families that tried to do it where they're both working. You have 2 parents out working and they're leaving their kids home to do their schoolwork. I'm sorry, that's not homeschooling. You're letting your kids educate themselves by probably being on their iPads all day long. But some families knock it out of the park and produce children that can get into Ivy League colleges. I mean, it's amazing. But there's also that Christian education model. And, a lot of families can't afford that. When my wife and I moved here, at a certain point, we had 3 kids in Christian schools, and there weren't education savings accounts, and we were paying hand over fist. And we lived in the Linn-Mar School District. I actually had a bunch of rental properties all in the Linn-Mar School District. And so all of that money was going into that school system, and I was getting none of the benefit of it at
Right.
all. I would have loved to have the model that we have today. But even then, we found a way to make it happen because we saw how important it was to make sure our kids were being educated with that biblical mindset, a biblical worldview, teaching them to see the world through that lens of Scripture is absolutely one of the best things you'll do for your children in their lives. Really setting that foundation, creating a legacy for them, a legacy of faith. Um, and so, yeah, very blessed how hard you guys worked to push the ESA program through. Lord willing, we're coming into this election cycle in November. One of these candidates, Mr. Lane, is a proponent of the
Oh,
system, and the
he's
other, Rob
amazing.
Sand, is not. And so, I doubt people wonder who I'm voting for. The fact is, I've invited both men on to, sit down and talk to me, and I'm looking forward to hopefully having those conversations with both of them. I doubt one of them will want to talk to me, but regardless, I do think that it's important that families are getting involved. How can people learn more about the education savings account?
So, education savings accounts, unfortunately, today is the last day to sign up if you are not yet signed up in the program. But then there is another, we changed the law again
So
this
there's a
year.
second, yeah,
There is a second sign up period that I believe is in late November.
right.
And so if you haven't looked into it, there's still time to look into it. But I would encourage parents to, even if you don't think that a Christian education is what you want for your
Yeah,
child, the school may be too small or whatever, be involved with your kids
100%.
where they are. And I'll share a story when you said about what influences you. So when I said about evolution,
Yeah,
my mom and I had that conversation because,
nice.
like I said, I was a science buff.
Sure.
And my teacher had us, when we were in 6th grade, we watched the uh, movie that was about the trial, the monkey trial
Oh,
in
yeah.
Tennessee,
Right.
and whether or not you could teach evolution. And so he showed us this movie and then challenged that how would we defend evolution? I mean, how could we not believe in it? So I came home and
Sure.
talked to my mom about it.
Right.
And she said, fine, you can come from monkeys. I came from God, you know. But in moving ahead, so I had this planted. And this is where parents need to know. So my mom made sure we went to a museum in Chicago called the Museum of Science and Industry.
Oh, I love
And
it.
they
If you
had
haven't been there, y'all need to go check it out. It's really
they
great.
had displays of babies at different
Yep, they
stages of
still do.
gestation. And then they started pushing the abortion law.
Mhm.
Now, I was in college when that was being pushed. It was before Roe v. Wade, and
Right.
I started hearing all about women's rights and
Mhm.
women's rights. And we were taught in high school that that cell could divide into a person, a frog, a horse,
Oh,
a
gosh.
pig, because they didn't know as much about DNA as they know now. And
Sure.
they were saying, and there was some scientist in Korea who had said he created an amoeba with electricity and the primal soup and all of that with the
Mhm.
right amino acids and everything. And we were being taught in anatomy
Right.
in 1968 and 9
Wow.
that you could take the cell and you could apply the right amount of electricity or stimulus and you could change its structure.
Wow.
So here comes the conversation about abortion. And this is just a blob of cells. It is
Right.
not yet a human until it develops that form that's in these displays at the
Right.
So
Each
I
of the stages,
believed
yeah.
until later
Mhm.
that, well, it actually was this blob of cells until I got in the lab and realized not only could the guy, he was proven to be a fraud, and we started proving DNA.
Mm.
And once we started proving the genetic makeup, then it's, oh, wow, this cannot become something else.
Sure.
And by that same token, evolution is impossible.
Right. I wish that in our
So those
public
that was planted in my head when I
Right.
was in school.
Yeah.
So what things have been planted in your child's head?
Right. And they teach those things as if they're fact. And they,
Yes.
right out of the gate, that's how they taught it. And that's why so many people, like hook, line, and sinker, really fell prey to what they were teaching was because, well, can't argue with that. I mean, it's fact. They've proven it. And, it turns out that, gosh, it was a bunch of hogwash. And they still refuse to, change their course on all of this. Evolution is still being taught in our school systems as fact. And, there are people advocating to teach creation alongside of evolution. I'm someone who's not exactly sure about that. Who are they going to allow to teach creation and what approach will they take? Because if they just have the same science teacher who's teaching evolution as fact, teaching creation as a possible alternative, that it's not going to be, given the right due diligence or any true justice. But I do think because we know as parents our children are being exposed to these things, it's that much more important that we're coming alongside of them. We're having those conversations, taking them to the Creation Museum in
Oh, it's
Kentucky.
amazing. Yeah.
I love that place. We've been there numerous times. If you go do a 2-day trip, also go to the Ark. The Ark Encounter is absolutely phenomenal. I remember as a young person really struggling with a few stories in the Bible. I think
Oh,
the
yeah.
Ark was one of those. And I remember as an adult, having faith. Okay, I just believe in faith. And then I, went and saw the Ark. They built it to biblical specifications. And you come around the corner and over the hill and you see this thing and you're like, oh, that makes a lot more sense.
Well, yeah, but this is where, while we're parental rights,
Mm.
we're also talking about parental responsibility.
Yes, thank you.
And that is a huge problem we have with several of the young families I've worked with where careers are more important than their children. And I remember, so I grew up in a family that was, my dad started a business and my mom would always say, we have to pay our employees first. So we had whatever was left. And we
Right.
had a lot of creamed whatever on toast.
Yeah.
And,
Yep, been
Yeah,
there.
stir fry rice where you got a lot of rice and a little of something. It
Right.
fills you up.
Yeah.
But we always, but but she always said we weren't poor. We had everything we needed. We
Amen.
might not have everything we wanted,
Right.
but we had everything we needed. And that's one of the things I stress for young families. Joe and I have a large family. There were several times we faced bankruptcy,
Hmm.
but we knew we had whatever we needed. And we
Sure.
said, if we lost everything, we could start over.
Yep.
But families have to focus on what is their priority.
Right.
And parental responsibility is a huge thing. I stress with my constituents, well, the public school is doing X, or, I don't like what's going on over here. Well, where's your personal responsibility in that situation?
Sure.
We are a government of the people,
Yes.
not of the government.
Right.
And stressing that we have that responsibility to know what our children are doing, know what's going on in our community, know who's on the ballot.
Yes.
Voting is a responsibility
Right.
of our citizenship.
Amen.
So,
And I love you. You and your husband, for many years, have been helping to teach the biblical citizenship in
yes.
modern America courses. I'm very fond of those courses as well. We've shared them here at Calvary a number of times, and are planning on doing it again soon. What has been your greatest takeaway from your time spent with those? Because I can tell you that every time I go through it, I think I learn something new, and I've seen them all. I don't even know how many times at this point. Do you have anything that stands out from those that have just been like, or I can share. Uh, I don't. I think it's the third episode, and they're talking about slavery and
Thomas Jefferson and how he didn't want slavery.
so many things
Yes.
within that. There's
I've actually seen that letter.
Yeah.
David Barton has
Oh, very cool.
where they had to cross out his original versions, eliminated slavery from the United States,
Yeah.
from the colonies.
Right.
But they were not going to be able to get all 13 colonies to come together if those stayed in there. And yet our children are being taught that Thomas Jefferson
Right.
was a slave trader. He was not. He actually, after his wife died, had a black wife. But they
Isn't that
didn't
fascinating?
acknowledge the marriage.
There's so many stories like that. There's another story of Reverend Hoosier in there, who was a black man, a reverend during the slave trade era, who made such a significant impact in the state of Indiana. It's now known as the Hoosier State. And yet, if you talk to somebody from Indiana about, well, why is your state known as the Hoosier State?
They have no
Nobody
idea.
knows. Oh, it's because of our basketball team. No, that's not it.
Well, and that's been blocked out. If you start trying to look that up on the internet, it's not there.
Isn't that
But I
fascinating?
have in our library at home, we have encyclopedias from the late 1800s, from 1940s, and from 1980s. And
Wow.
how they describe things are very different. You can see the twist. You can see the
cultural
correcting, the
shifts.
cultural shift, and the slight changes. What are we going to leave out, and how are we going to twist this story?
Wow.
So those things are so very important. The biggest thing that I learned was that these men, well, I had learned it in school that these men had their lives and their fortunes, on the line.
Yeah.
But actually how much that meant as we got into their writings and the faith that it took. And not only the faith in God, but the understanding that they were dependent on each other, or this was not going to happen.
Right.
And that dependence on each other, having the confidence that the other guy next to you has your back, that took a lot of courage.
Right.
So you can profess to have a lot of faith, but trusting that the person next to you has that same faith and the courage to stand with you
Right.
is
That's the
very
key.
different.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting how many people profess a faith that they don't truly stand up in very often. And that's one thing at Calvary that we're really working on in folks. I mean, Scripture tells us faith without works is dead. It doesn't mean that we're saved by our works. It means that our works are a demonstration of our
Of
faith.
our faith,
And
yes.
as we, make our way through this world, we're supposed to shine as a light. And, that means in every situation all the time, not just when it suits our purposes or when it's easy to do, but oftentimes when it's the most difficult to do. And I think that that's something that we've lost some of over the years within the faith community, and yet I believe we're starting to see some of that ground taken back. When we went through the I call it the scamdemic, or people
I
call it
agree with
a
you.
plandemic, whatever. The church was
Intentional
tested.
destruction?
Yes, indeed. The church was tested, and a lot of churches failed miserably. But you saw within the ranks of the church, and when I say church in this sense, it's the people, not a address, not, a building, and not even a particular denomination, but, people of faith. You've seen a resurgence of faith in people that has been so exciting to be a part of. I, for one, was absolutely blessed by the scamdemic, because we saw so much trouble and trial, and there's been no doubt pain and heartache, and I get it. With the illnesses that people experienced, it's not great. My dad got COVID and had long COVID issues that turned into COPD, and he just passed away a few weeks ago after years of dealing with that. But you know what? Strong man of faith, loved the Lord. When I heard that he had graduated, I smiled. He was released from this temporal shell and entered into the kingdom of heaven. So it's okay to look past some of the trials that we faced, and to look at the greater lesson that we learned.
I celebrate that we had COVID.
Yes,
I
thank you.
just need to tell you that a lot of the things with education, with families,
Yes.
with government, it opened our eyes.
Right.
And it didn't matter how much I knew before that. Now other people know. And I don't have to tell them about some of the things that I knew from science, from the things that I did, some of the, and opening a whole nother thing, vaccines and
I
all
know,
of that
gosh, yeah,
about,
ridiculous.
I knew it because of testing that we had done in
Yeah.
the lab. And so I did things slightly different with my children than was trying to be shoved down everybody's throat. But it opened people up when they saw what their children were learning. That's
Mhm.
when we found out about the books in school.
Right.
That's when we found out about the gender transitions.
All the
That's when we
ideology,
found
yeah.
out all of these things. It became crystal clear when we found out about the excessive power of the government.
Mm.
And another celebration, we passed a limit of the executive powers this year, and the governor signed it.
Nice.
So in another emergency, the churches, they can't shut down the churches.
Praise the Lord.
They can't extend the governor's powers beyond 30 days without legislative action. There are things that cannot be done. Now we passed the law. It's
Yeah.
not in our Constitution, but it is in the law that the governor still has certain executive powers that the
Sure, that's
executive
important.
must have, but we limited it. And COVID was the example.
Hmm.
And so people have awakened, I think. But I want to go back to that responsibility. We can only at the legislature we have the power to change laws,
Sure.
but they're only as good as they are enforced.
Right.
And I'm not talking about ratting on other people,
Right,
but
of course.
we're saying these certain things are not allowed anymore. And if it's happening in your child's school, stand up and say, knock it off.
Right.
Make them know that you are paying attention. And in your cities, I go to these city council meetings. There's 11 cities in my district. I go to at least one city council meeting each year, just to know
Sure.
what's going on. I'll stay through the whole meeting. We're starting to get a few people coming to their city council meeting. So heads up, anybody here in Iowa, if your city council is talking about a data center, make them aware that you're paying attention.
Yes, amen.
Going back to that first conversation, once a data center is approved inside the city limits, then the Iowa Utilities Commission and the energy company, Alliant or Mid-America or whoever, has the authority to put in the power that is needed for that data center.
Oh, boy.
And with that comes eminent domain for where does it get located And how are the transmission lines going to go? That's all eminent domain authority because it's a utility.
Right. And that Morgan Valley plant is gas combustion. There's high pressure gas lines that they're having to run into
I
that.
was told a 3-foot diameter
It's a significant
natural
line.
gas line
Yeah. And it's high pressure. Not like your typical natural gas lines that are running around,
to
feeding our
your house. Yeah.
barbecues,
Yeah.
and I think that people don't get really how dangerous that can be, the kind of pressure those are under if there happened to be a seam split where all of that gas sits heavy in that's a valley, by the way,
Well,
the
the
kind
natural
of
gas will go up, but somebody will blow up.
yeah, the kind
Yeah.
of devastation that it could cause.
Yeah.
But, we just I think awareness is the key, trying to remind people that, you know, to be part of a functional society is to be aware of what's going on around you. Be aware of what's going on in your home. Be aware of what's going on in your church. Be aware of what's going on within the school system. And we've brought up the public school system a few times, and I always like to throw this out there. I'm certainly not saying that the public school system is absolute garbage. There's some
There are
amazing
some very good
educators
schools.
in our state. There are some amazing schools in our state, public schools, private schools, and the like. We just have issues that need to be tended to. One of the other things that we've talked about over the years, especially of late, is the whole gender issue with boys competing in girls' sports. What are we doing on that front? I feel like we've
Well,
gotten pretty strong here.
in Iowa, we have a law that says the boys cannot compete in girls' sports. That was passed before I was in the legislature.
Oh, okay.
So we've had some challenges where our college teams, boys can't compete in girls' sports in our college teams, but when they go play in another state, they may be competing against boys on a girls' team.
Oh,
So there's some challenges with that, but it's again the enforcement
yeah,
and parents. So one of the things that we passed was a teacher's defense bill. So we do have a lot of conservative teachers who were being silenced, they were being threatened, they're intimidated, and their jobs were at risk if they would speak up because you get what you measure. Now think about our education system.
sure,
We used to have pride in our academic excellence.
sure.
And then we started measuring graduation rates.
Oh,
And so it was more important to graduate a child who didn't know the basics
sure,
than it was to keep that child back and teach them. So
sure.
we're promoting graduation
Yeah,
rates.
shuffling kids through the
Yeah.
system rather than really meeting their needs.
Now
Yeah.
think about the next thing. Schools were rated on disciplinary issues. So when my older kids were in school, if you got a detention, you stayed after school.
Sure,
And if you got a suspension, you were home.
right,
Mom and dad had to know where you were. Then they started in school suspension.
right.
And it doesn't make sense. Follow the money. When a kid's at home on suspension, the school doesn't get any money.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
When it's in school suspension, the student
I've
is
never
still,
connected those dots. That's
yeah,
interesting.
you connect dots.
Yeah.
You follow the money when it doesn't make sense. So when there's disciplinary problems and a teacher starts talking about disciplinary problems, typically it was getting shoved aside by administration because it gets to a point the administration has to acknowledge it, and that's a ding against the school. Instead of saying we have a disciplinary problem we're going to address and we're going to correct, we look the other way because it might be a strike against me as the administrator,
Sure.
and I can't get that next higher paying
Oh,
job.
wow.
When it doesn't make sense, you follow the money. So we passed a law for teachers' defense that they have a method of objecting to behaviors in their school or reporting problems that can circumvent the administration if the administration is not supporting the teachers. And that's the biggest complaint we heard from teachers over the last 4 years is that they were not being supported by the administration because the administration was getting rated on discipline issues.
Wow. Isn't that
So you
something?
get what you measure.
Right.
And so we had to make
fascinating.
a law that defended teachers from their administration. How bizarre is that?
Yeah, you'd like to say that that's shocking, but we've seen so much failure in the system that it makes a lot of sense. Let's shift gears and talk about gun rights.
Sure.
The Second Amendment, our rights in that regard are foundational to our country's well-being, even to how we came to be. What efforts are underway to, or maybe even needed to fortify gun rights? I will say that we've come a long way since
Oh,
I've
yeah.
been here 17 years. When I first moved here, if you had a concealed carry permit, every county, 99 counties, every county had a different permit to carry. And it made it almost impossible to live in one county and work in another. Like, I live in a neighboring county than where our church is. And if you were, traveling between counties, then you might be breaking one county's rule for a concealed carry permit. Now, we've come a long way. That's all gone away. Now, an 18-year-old can carry a
Yes, we passed
pistol. And
that law.
I personally am one who, cautiously love that idea. My family is, well, we're rooted in American culture. We have our own shooting range. We shoot regularly as a family. We teach our children from a very young age the dangers of firearms, and also how to use them properly. What kinds of things, if anything, is coming down the pipe in the ranks right now?
Well, there were some things. So we passed the castle law,
Yes,
which
love that.
means that you can defend your property. And of course, that was challenged over there. We had a situation in Palo where, and the homeowner was acquitted for shooting someone who was breaking into his home,
Right.
had already ransacked a couple other
The,
homes.
the law previous was a retreat law where you had to retreat. If somebody broke into your home and you had the ability to retreat, then you had to show that you did that. The problem with that, for instance, is that the home that we used to live in Marion, our room was on one side of the house and our kids' rooms were on the other. According to the law, if someone were to break into our house, and I'm on one side of the house and I have a way to get out through like a bedroom door, then I'm obligated to do that, even though my children are on the other
Right.
side. That's the way the law was written. And so I really do appreciate that you guys took that on and castle law is now in place.
So now we have some things we need to strengthen with that law, because that law can only come up once you are arrested and once. So we want that to preempt what other
Yeah,
things are there, the way it was written or the way it's been determined. So that's one. The second one is that if you have a concealed weapon, that you may still, as long as it's safely concealed, that you may drive through the school parking lot and pick up your children.
sure.
That you don't have, because you could right now, it's a gun-free zone.
Right,
You cannot have, even if it's concealed.
right.
So we're working on that. We're working on your ability to have your gun in your car in a parking lot.
Sure.
Now, that's being pushed back by some of
Yeah.
the big businesses who don't want you to have that. We did pass a law that said that schools may have armed teachers who have been
Yes.
properly trained. And the thing I like about this, we are already that law was already in existence. Schools could do that,
Hmm.
but we tightened it so that if you have an employee of the school, of the school district,
Yeah.
they have to have special training, and that training is more than police officers get.
Hmm.
So we have not only strengthened it, we've made it better than it was, but we made it a point to let school districts know you cannot say that we can't do it because of the law.
Right.
Now, if you don't want it, you have to stand up to those parents and tell them why you don't want their children defended
Right.
against
It doesn't make
somebody
any
breaking
sense at
into the
all.
school.
It-
I hear about school shootings all the time, and from the same parents that don't want a teacher to be armed. What better defense from someone? We know already these school shootings have happened in gun-free zones
Right.
and in areas where firearms are not allowed to be handled by regular citizens,
Right.
but the criminals have them.
Right.
They're going to find a way to break into the school.
Right. They don't see a sign that says gun-free zone, and they're
and-
like, "Oh, I can't go in there."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what better defense for your children than to have a trained staff person
Amen.
be armed and take down that problem before whoever it is
Yeah.
fires on children?
At our school, Calvary Christian Academy, we have 3 safety team members at all times on the grounds that are armed, and they train. uh, to the standards of the state law enforcement. They have to qualify. It's called ILEA. They have to
Yeah.
do the ILEA qualifications. It's the same with our church. Our church has, gosh, we have, I think, almost 50 members on our safety team, and same standard. If they're going to be a part of it in a carrying function, they have to qualify to those standards. And we have a rigorous training program that we put them through, because if you're going to carry a firearm, then you should train
well
with
trained.
it. Yeah. But I wish there was more people that felt that way, that thought that way, because it is again a foundational part of who we are as a country. The right that we have to defend ourselves.
It comes back to responsibility too.
It does.
And so my husband and I, we listen to audiobooks.
Yeah,
We've been
I love it.
listening to a lot of them about World War II,
Mm.
and I'm listening to one now that is about some of the underground in France. And what they did was they de-armed the population.
Right.
And in any of these government takeovers, they de-arm the population.
That's right.
I have a friend, she passed away, but when the Tsar of Russia was taken
Right.
down, they de-armed the population. So they took away the Tsar, they killed him, but then the rest of the population, you could not have a firearm unless you belonged to their group.
Right.
And the same in Nazi Germany.
Right.
The Nazis could have guns, but nobody else could. The same in other countries where there were takeovers. So to me, it is much more than just school shootings and those
Yeah.
things. It is a national safety.
Yeah.
It is. I am constantly amazed when I go to other countries and you Americans and your guns. Well, I think, yeah.
Right.
And you're not likely to invade us.
Right.
Because we are heavily armed.
The largest army in the world is the American hunter. I read that recently. I do hope that people listening that may not feel the same way about firearms that we do, that they would take the time to do the research, especially what you're talking about with the disarming of people. I mean, you look at Cuba, you look at El Salvador, you look at any country
Throughout history.
Yeah, they take away the firearms so they can control the people. It's important that as a nation, our eyes are on the Lord. He's our hope. He's our protector. He's the high tower we run into in times of trouble. But he also, if you look at Scripture, you see so many great examples of people defending themselves. The book of Nehemiah is a great example of that.
Yes.
They were building the walls, one hand on their sword, one hand on their trowel. They were in an area where people didn't want them to be, and they had to build their walls to defend their way of life. And as a part of building their walls, they might have to war a bit that day to get the wall done. And I think biblically speaking, it is a God-given right to defend your family. And I think that as a nation, we're seeing more and more movement in the right direction in that regard. There's been some really great movement with the federal government in regard to suppressors and a variety of things. But I will say that, at the end of the day, it's okay if people feel differently as well, because that's what makes this nation so great, is we all have the right to choose the way that we're going to feel about something. I would just encourage people that feel another way to not let their feelings encroach on my rights.
Well, and I take that back to personal responsibility again.
Sure.
So I personally don't carry. I have a concealed carry permit, but I feel very comfortable when I'm in the Capitol. And we have a lot of times where it's a little tense in the Capitol
Sure.
when you get people rioting about
Yeah.
a variety of things. But I feel comfortable on two fronts, in that I have a strong faith,
Yes.
but I also know that the guys around me are
They're gonna take
mostly
care of business. Yeah.
are armed.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
that's a good thing. It's funny too. We see that within the ranks of government. Any government official within the ranks of states and certainly on the federal level, those protections are afforded. And so we should want them, for instance, back to the school conversation, in our classrooms as well, so that our kids, who are the most innocent among us, also have those same protections. We're basically out of time. Representative Golding, I want to thank you for being here. I really could probably just spend the rest of the day talking to you. We're definitely going to have to do this again soon. What would you like to say to folks on your way out of here today? How can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about you? Do you have events coming up?
Well, you can get on my newsletter.
Okay.
You can go to cindygolding.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. Send me an email, cindy@cindygolding.com. I list all the activities that I have coming up. My phone number is there. You're
Nice.
more than welcome to call me. It rings my cell phone. I don't have staff. It's 319-360-1028. Show up at Atkins today at 6:30, or it's at Lynn County Supervisors tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. But the other thing, what I want people to take away is that I am a proponent of local government.
Yes.
Government that's closest to the people is best, but it only works when people accept the responsibility to be involved.
Amen. Amen. As we wrap up, I want to remind folks of just that. Our faith is not separate from our politics. It's really the foundation. And it means that we have to engage at the grassroots level. We have to vote our values, and we've got to pray for our leaders. And so if today's conversation encouraged you, I'd encourage you to share it with your friends, and then tune in next time for more Grassroots Iowa. Representative Golding, again, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Love what you're doing. We pray for you often.
Thank you, Pastor Jeremy. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Y'all have a blessed day.